Hi everybody, I'm here in Auburn, Alabama with Dr. Tom Woods Jr. He is a historian, senior fellow member of the Mises Institute, and author of several books, including his most recent and New York Times bestseller, Meltdown. Dr. Woods, it's a pleasure to have you along on Motorhome Diaries.
Thank you so much.
As you've stated in Meltdown, the Federal Reserve is responsible for most, if not all, of the economic crises of the last century. How is this possible, and what can an individual do to offset the manipulative nature of the Federal Reserve?
Well, it's interesting that in this crisis that we're enduring now, that we're getting a lot of attention now for the so-called Austrian theory of the business cycle. Now, when you hear that, a lot of people think, I don't know, this sounds too technical, I could never understand it. Well, it's essential for Americans to understand this, because the people who are running our government and running the Federal Reserve know nothing about this. And once you do learn it, once you really do understand why the economy moves in these violent boom and bust sort of patterns, then you can better evaluate the proposals these people are putting forth. Again, the Fed is not part of the free market. If it were, it wouldn't have had to have been created by an act of Congress and then have the government appointing some of its personnel and then be given a government privilege of being able to create legal tender money out of thin air. That's not any free market institution I'm familiar with. And what the so-called Austrian economists have said is that when you have a government-established central bank, and this can even happen in the absence of a central bank, but still there's always some government privilege in the background. And this institution interferes in the free market. And in particular, when this institution, the central bank, the Federal Reserve, interferes with interest rates and tampers with free market interest rates, the result is massive errors committed by businessmen and investors who invest in things that the free market is trying to tell them not to invest in. But they can't see that because it's obscured by the Fed's intervention. Meanwhile, consumers are also making errors, because particularly in the most recent boom, it was housing that really got a lot of this new Fed money thrown into it. So a lot of people drew the false conclusion that they were loaded because, look at my house is appreciating all the time. Fed economists told them this was not a bubble, this is a normal thing, this is real factors, this is going to continue. So people thought, well, why should I save? What kind of a sucker would I be to save when I've got a house that's just going to keep going through the roof? So you got businessmen and investors making investment decisions that don't make sense in light of real economic conditions, and you have consumers making consumption decisions that don't make sense in light of their actual net worth, which they can't see clearly because, once again, the Fed is obscuring it. So what we need is to basically liberate ourselves from this awful superstition that the Fed is the great stabilizer of our economy. When you look at the Fed and the various regional banks and the U.S. Treasury, the U.S. government, it's a big revolving door of all these people in and out of government, in and out of the Fed, in and out of the banks, in and out of Wall Street. It's the same group of people. And when in 2008 the big bailout package came along, and both McCain and Obama, the two big great opponents, came forward and said, we've got to do this to rescue the economy, what of course they mean is we've got to rescue these elites who are at the top of this whole thing, to heck with the rest of the country. And apparently that didn't compromise Obama's populist appeal one bit. Well, it's about time for people to wake up to this, don't you think?
I do. It's happened before where we've rid two central banks here in the United States.
Yeah.
It seems that the general people have a fear of what would happen. It'd be
right.
chaos.
Yeah.
What can we tell the people to alleviate their fear if we were successful in abolishing?
Well, I would say right now, look at what you've got going on. You've got a guy, Ben Bernanke, the Fed chairman, who has the power to create trillions of dollars, just create it, and then blow it on we don't even know what. In fact, Bloomberg, which is a totally mainstream financial business business network, actually is suing the Fed to demand that it turn over this information. And the Fed is stonewalling, saying, we don't have to tell you. Now that is a kind of chaos, isn't it? We have a totally lawless institution that can act like this, and to think that we should be scared of getting rid of that, I have much more confidence in us as a free people and what we could accomplish in the absence of this institution. If we believe we have to have a Fed, what we're really saying is that central planning doesn't work when it comes to food or shoes or hats, but the most important lifeblood of the economy, the money system and interest rates, well, here we need to have a Soviet commissar telling us what they should be. And I think it is rank superstition that is unworthy of a free people to believe that there is one individual who is omnipotent and who has all the knowledge he needs Banks to decide, I think the structure of interest rates should be as follows. I mean, this is just silly. I mean, we might as well use a Ouija board, you know what I mean? Well, instead, these things should be set just through the voluntary exchanges of people, the way we set any price, the way the price of bread is set.
So, but what is the alternative then? Is it just to implement another central bank? Is it a gold standard?
Well, one possible outcome would be a system sort of like what we had in the past, which was one in which you have a money system in which we would be using the green pieces of paper. We could also use gold and silver coins. There'd be no reason not to. But if some people wanted to use paper as a substitute, the paper would nevertheless be a perfect substitute for some weight of a precious metal. So it wouldn't just be some phony baloney money that could just be created infinitely, because there's no infinite supply of gold and silver that would correspond to it. You could, on the other hand, have go to the next step and say, why would I trust these crummy jerks? Like, why would I trust anyone ranging from Nancy Pelosi to Barney Frank to John McCain to be in charge of the money supply in any way? Because I think some people are of the opinion we should get rid of the Fed and make sure the Congress can directly control the money supply. Have you been looking at these people in the Congress? I mean, so another possible solution, and this will sound radical to people, but I think the more we talk about it, the less radical it sounds. F.A. Hayek, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics, by the late 70s was starting to argue that we can never again trust government to give us good money. This is the worst superstition you can imagine. And the idea that governments got into the money business in the first place because they wanted to give us good money for the common good, and they're just doing this selflessly to help society, is total nonsense. That governments got into the money business because they want to be close to where the money's coming from, so they can get their take and hand it out to their friends. I mean, this is what, forget this nonsense you were taught in 7th grade about the government brings about the common good. No, it doesn't. It's a bunch of crooks who use their privileged position to loot the rest of society. And to say that they need to have a monopoly on money production right away gives the whole game away. So Hayek says, no, there is no economic reason that these people need to have a monopoly over money. In fact, Ron Paul says, let's just give real money a chance. Give peace a chance, give money a chance. If you want to keep using your crummy green pieces of paper from the Federal Reserve, well, be my guest. In the short run, I'll let you even do that. Wonderful. But give me the fair chance to use something real. And then we'll see what happens. And I'm telling you, if I save for my retirement simply by piling up gold coins, and you save for your retirement by piling up green pieces of paper, I bet you I'll be taking exotic vacations and you'll be sitting in the doghouse.